Hello everyone! Welcome to another episode of Science Lecture video series with Sir Geronimo. Let's get started. Hello everyone! So welcome back to another Science Lecture video series. And for this day, we will be talking about the elements and compounds. Our second lesson under Unit 2, which is about the diversity of materials in the environment. For this video, we will be identifying the learning competency, and that is to recognize that substances are classified into elements and compounds. So that is our objective that we need to accomplish and attain for this video. Now, let me start by asking you this question. Have you ever wondered about the components of your toothpaste? So of course, all of us are brushing our teeth 3 times a day. And of course, you are using a toothpaste. Now, have you ever wondered about the components or the ingredients of your toothpaste? And if you are interested, you may look at the ingredients part of your container, of your toothpaste, and you can see that the active ingredient is sodium fluoride. And the purpose of it is for the anti-cavity purposes. And did you know that fluoride is created when the salts from the element fluorine combine with minerals in soil or rocks? So therefore, it is a component of your toothpaste, and fluoride is made up or is created from fluorine as the base element. However, did you know that fluorine is a very toxic element? A fluorine gas is so reactive that it can ignite everything it touches. So why do they add fluoride, which is created from fluorine, to our toothpaste? Is it safe to us even though it came from a toxic element, fluorine? So we will be able to answer those questions in this video. So before we identify and differentiate elements and compounds, let us have a short review first of our lesson. So our unit talks about matter. And we all know that matter is anything that occupies space and has mass. Some examples include your chair, your tables, your gadgets, and everything around us as long as it occupies space and has mass. And the building block of matter is what we call an atom. So all the things that are considered matter are made up of atom, including you as human. Now, matter is classified into 2. We have the substances and the mixtures. If in case you don't know yet the difference between substances and mixture, please go back to our previous lesson. Now, for the substances, it is classified into 2. First, we have the elements, and the other one is a compound. So this is the topic that we will be talking about today in our video lecture. So we will differentiate elements and compounds. For the mixture, we have 3 different classifications. We have the solution, colloids, and suspension. Now, let us start determining and identifying the different characteristics and properties of an element. So let's start with elements. Elements are said to be the simplest pure substances. And why are they considered as the simplest pure substances? Because they are made up of only one kind of atom. And another thing about elements is that they cannot be broken down into 2 or more simpler substances because they are made up of only one kind of atom. Atom cannot be broken down into smaller or simpler substances. And to this day, elements can be found everywhere. And if you want to know how many elements are there are about 180 known elements in the modern periodic table. So the periodic table of elements will tell us the different properties of each element that can be found around us. Now, let's talk about the periodic table of elements. Of the 118 known elements up to this day, 98 elements are naturally occurring, meaning to say they can be found naturally in our environment. And the remaining 20 are said to be synthetic, meaning to say these elements are generated or synthetically made inside the laboratory. Now, another thing about elements is that in terms of the composition of our Earth's crust and the Earth's atmosphere. So let me just give you some information regarding the common elements. First, oxygen is the most abundant element in the Earth's crust. So first, oxygen is an element. And did you know that the composition of Earth crust, oxygen is the most abundant? Meaning to say, it takes up around 47% of our Earth's crust. Followed by silicon, which is 28% or 27.7%. Followed by aluminum, which is 8.1%. And the remaining elements are the iron, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and calcium. So those are the compositions of the Earth's crust, wherein the oxygen is the most abundant. How about in our Earth's atmosphere? In the Earth's atmosphere, nitrogen is the element that is the most abundant in the Earth's atmosphere. About 78% of the Earth's atmosphere is made up of nitrogen, followed by oxygen, which is 21%, while the other elements, including argon, is the remaining 1%. In terms of the human body, we are also made up of elements. So, our body is made up of 65% oxygen, 18% carbon, 10% hydrogen, and 3% nitrogen. That's why these four elements are considered as the most abundant elements in the human body. Therefore, the four most abundant elements in the human body are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, also known as the CHON, C-H-O-N. Let us talk about the symbols of common elements. Of course, there are so many elements in our periodic table, and we can identify them as well by means of their symbols. And symbols of elements can vary. It can be a single letter or a double letter. So how do we identify the different symbols of the common elements? First, it can be derived from an English name. So let's say, for example, carbon, capital C. Fluorine, capital F. Hydrogen, capital H. Iodine, capital I. And nitrogen, capital N. There are also other elements which are said to be having two symbols. We have here the aluminum, which is Al. So take note, class, in writing the element symbol, the first letter must be in capitalized, while the second letter or the other remaining letters must be in lowercase. Barium Ba, calcium Ca, chlorine Cl, and helium He. There are also other elements that are derived from foreign names, or also known as, in some elements, they are derived from their Latin names. So we have here gold. The element symbol of gold is Au, which means aurum. Iron, Fe, which is ferrum. Lead, Pb, or plumbum. Mercury, Hg, or hydrangerium. And potassium, K, kalium. So, as you can see, it is not similar to other elements which are derived from their English names. They are derived from foreign names or other names. And lastly, there are some elements that are derived from famous scientists, discoverer, or even planets and countries. So we have here the Einsteinium, which is derived from a famous scientist, Albert Einstein, and the symbol is Es. Seaborgium derived from the name of the discoverer, so SG. Americium and plutonium derived from planets and countries, AM and PU respectively. So those are some common elements that can be found in the periodic table. Now, let us proceed to compounds. So what is the difference of compounds to the elements? If the elements are the purest form of pure substances, or they are said to be the simplest form of pure substances, compounds, on the other hand, are composed of two or more different elements in a fixed proportion. Meaning to say, compounds can be made by combining two or more elements, but in a fixed proportion. So you will know later why. Another one is, how are we going to combine the elements to form a compound? They are chemically combined. So this is an example of a compound. Carbon monoxide is a compound made from one atom of carbon and one atom of oxygen. So carbon and oxygen, when they are separated, they are individual elements. But when we combine them chemically, we will be able to form a compound. And that compound is what we call carbon monoxide, or CO. Carbon monoxide is a gas that is being excreted or being produced as byproducts of the vehicles, yung usok sa sasakyan. Okay? So, carbon monoxide. Another example of compound is carbon dioxide, CO2. It is made up of one carbon and two oxygen atoms. So, as you can see, compounds are composed of two or more different elements in a fixed proportion. If you add one more oxygen to carbon monoxide, it will not be carbon monoxide anymore. Instead, it will become carbon dioxide, a different gas. This is the gas that we breathe out, no? So of course, there are differences in the properties of the two different compounds just because we add only one oxygen atom. So, meaning to say, two different compounds, each has a definite composition and each of them have different properties. Another thing about the compounds is this. The properties of a compound is different from the properties of its components, elements. No? So, take note, the properties of a whole compound are different from the properties of its component elements. One example is this. For us to create water, which is H2O, we need to combine chemically two different gases. We have the hydrogen and oxygen gases. Hydrogen is a gas that is not normally consumed by human being, while oxygen is the gas that we need in order for us to live. But when we combine them chemically, we will be able to produce water. So meaning to say, the properties of each element found in water, the hydrogen and oxygen, are different from the properties of hydrogen and oxygen gas alone. Another example is when you make sodium chloride or table salt. Sodium chloride is made up of sodium metal and chlorine gas. Sodium metal is a highly flammable gas, while chlorine gas is very toxic gas. So meaning to say, our table salt is made up from two different elements that are said to be very toxic to us. But when we combine them chemically, we are capable of producing a stable salt or a sodium chloride. And this is used when we cook our food. So, can you imagine that we are capable of producing a compound but we are not carrying over the properties of the individual elements. So, it is not toxic anymore. Okay? Therefore, it is safe to use fluoride even though it has fluorine component on it. So don't worry when you use your toothpaste. You can still brush your teeth using a toothpaste because the properties of fluorine being a toxic gas is not evident anymore in the fluoride component of the toothpaste. So take note, fluorine is an element while fluoride is a compound. Last, there is a slight differences in combinations of atoms that can have large difference in their properties. One example is H2O or water, and if we add one oxygen atoms to H2O, it will become H2O2. But it will not be water anymore. It is already a hydrogen peroxide or agua oxigenada, the one that we use, or the liquid that we use to treat our wounds, or antiseptic property. Now, another example is ethanol, or ethyl alcohol, which is drinkable because we use that also for our beverages, C2H6O is the chemical compound or the composition of this compound, We have two atoms of carbon, 6 atoms of hydrogen, and 1 atom of oxygen. But if we change the composition of ethanol, let's say for example, we make it C2H6O2, we add one more oxygen atom, it will not be ethanol anymore. It will become ethylene glycol, which is a poisonous liquid. Therefore, slight differences in combinations of atoms can have large difference in the properties. Now, let us summarize the lesson. So, what are the difference between elements and compounds? Elements is the simplest form of pure substance, while compounds, it is made up of 2 or more elements chemically combined. Elements cannot be chemically decomposed into simpler substances, but compound can be decomposed into simpler substances by chemical changes. So we can still separate the individual elements from a compound through chemical reaction, while elements, we cannot chemically decompose them, or we cannot separate the individual components of an element because it is the simplest form of pure substance. Elements are made up of only one kind of atom, while the compounds, the properties of a compound is different from the properties of its component elements. So those are the difference between elements and compounds. And next time that you encounter an element or compound, make sure to recognize them based on their properties. Now, thank you for listening and see you on the next lesson.